how do they actually help? Like what's the mechanism? There are several different mechanisms. So as I mentioned earlier, some of these B vitamins have a mechanism, actually let's move this over, of homocysteine. But what about CoQ10? CoQ10, you need it to drive mitochondrial function. And so your mitochondria are what actually give your body the ability to produce energy, or ATP. And so there's some research that shows that migraines particularly can be triggered as a result of the inability to generate adequate energy. And so the nerve in the blood vessel starts to malfunction, triggering the migraine. But also this can be also found true in kind of your tension or your stress-based. So tension, we'll use the term tension headache. What is a tension headache, right? This is more kind of muscle related, and CoQ10 deficiency causes, as a side effect, causes myospasm, which is, muscle spasm. So we got CoQ10 deficiency can contribute to muscle spasm. Magnesium deficiency can create or contribute to muscle spasm. Calcium deficiency can contribute or create muscle spasm, leading to increasing the risk for the development of tension headaches. And so what works great for this, and so a lot of people will seek out kind of therapeutic treatments. So they'll go see, for this, they'll go see massage, or they'll do chiropractic care, or they'll do physical therapy or PT, or they'll do yoga because yoga is relaxing, or they'll do meditation because meditation can help calm the muscles down, or they'll drink things that reduce, like valerian or passion flower teas, things of that nature, where muscle spasms can somewhat be reduced. But I would say if you're low in nutrients, okay, nutrients, the reason you always hear me harp on nutrients. Why? You'll hear me always harp on nutrients more than I harp on anything else, and that's because they are essential. What does that mean? That means without them, your body can't function. That's why they're called essential nutrients. Okay, so I'm not opposed to any of these things. I think all these things are wonderful. I think chiropractic care is fantastic. I get adjusted once a week. I think massage is fantastic. I think PT and yoga and meditation and relaxation techniques are all wonderful. But none of these things will correct a deficiency of a nutrient. Remember, nutrients are essential. These things are adjunctive. So these are add-ons. These are things that can be very helpful, but if you have a nutritional deficiency, these things are going to give you temporary relief, because if these things are the real true origin or cause, again, temporary relief, this is where it's at. This is why I harp on this first. So again, I'm not against these things, and I think a lot of people really benefit greatly from these, but start with nutritional essentials. And if you're still struggling, you feel better, but you're still struggling, then you bring in these adjunctive or add-on therapies, because sometimes these are helpful to kind of break through. You might have muscle adhesions. You might have an imbalance in your spine that needs to be adjusted. You might have super tight muscles because you've been deficient in magnesium for 5 years and didn't really figure it out until you asked your doctor to run the test. And so all these things, remember, they all work together, but this stuff right here is essential. It's primary. It's kind of the basis or the foundation for trying to figure out what's contributing to the problem. And if you don't address these things, then these things just become aspirin-like. They are helpful, they reduce the pain, but they don't really solve why the pain is there. And what we're after is a solution. We're not after a temporary feel-good. So again, with tension headaches, this is particularly true. Calcium, magnesium, iron deficiency can also create muscle spasm. I didn't point that out a minute ago, because iron deficiency causes anemia. That anemia leads to oxygen reduction in the muscle. When the muscles don't have enough oxygen, they go into a spasmodic state. And as I mentioned about these two, these can help with hormones and hormone regulation. Okay, and then these ones all play a role in that homocysteine connection. So these are all nutritional deficiencies that if you haven't yet, if you struggle with headaches, again, doesn't matter whether it's cluster, whether it's homocysteine or not homocysteine, whether it's cluster, whether it's tension, or whether it's migraine type headaches, you want to definitely have these investigated. Now, I'm going to dive in a little bit more to something I haven't talked about yet, at least not to a great degree, and that's the sinus headache. Now, I mentioned earlier, sinus headaches are oftentimes allergy-based, meaning, and so again, I said that most doctors will say it's seasonal allergies, so this could be outdoor allergens, but this could also be food allergens or chemical allergens or chemical exposures. And so those are important to look at too. So if you struggle with chronic sinus headaches and you're on allergy medication and you're still struggling and you've had this done, you've had your doctor, your allergist has run outdoor allergens, you could, okay, so when ragweed's high, you stay inside, but you still struggle. It's time to look at food. It's time to look at the potential for chemical reactivity as well, because these can also create a sinus headache. The other thing I've seen commonly create a sinus headache are yeast and bacterial overgrowths in the sinus cavities. Very common to see that. And so what this will do is this will create increase in mucus. It will increase inflammation, and that will lead to a headache. And so what a lot of people will do, not knowing, because they don't know they have these issues, and one of the big ones I see is this one right here, is the yeast. And one of the reasons why is so many people are put on antibiotics. And one of the side effects of chronic antibiotic use is yeast overgrowth, and that includes in your sinus cavities. And so if you have been to the doctor and they've said, yeah, you got a sinus infection, 99 times out of 100 in my experience, they'll never culture you. They'll never run a swab up deep into your sinus cavity to see whether you have an infection. They'll assume you have an infection. They'll give you an antibiotic. You might have a yeast infection. The antibiotic doesn't do anything, doesn't make it get better. The yeast persists and gets stronger, and this can grow year after year after year, creating persistent headache. And so what happens with the sinus headache over time is it reduces the surface, or it reduces the space in your nasal cavity. So it reduces, really more than space, it reduces airflow. So when you're trying to go to bed at night, what you suffer with is an apnea. I get this all the time. People coming to me, yeah, my doctor said I had sleep apnea. What do? They put you on a CPAP machine. What happens with a CPAP machine? They get really, really dirty, and they generally harbor yeast and bacteria. And so sometimes what happens, people on the CPAP do a lot better. CPAP can work really, really well, but over time, it just re-inoculates them, recreating the problem. And so you can see it just becomes a vicious circle. And I want you to understand that, because the CPAP generally, again, is to force airflow to improve oxygenation when we're sleeping. But if we can improve airflow by backtracking here in the first place, in other words, figuring this piece out, then you may not even have a true sleep apnea. You may just have a reduced airflow, again, as a result of the increased mucus and inflammatory production by these two elements. So very important to ask your doctor to check that out. So if you struggle with headaches and you have sleep apnea, this may be part of the issue. Now, what I have seen work really, really well for some folks who struggle here is if you've ever nasal rinsing. So you could use like a neti device, like a neti pot. You could also use like a hook-nosed bottle where you can control the fluid flow, but using this with like a saline solution, a lot of times will help flush out the sinuses, which can help to increase airflow and reduce apnea. But again, even this is not a solution if the problem is yeast and bacteria or food allergy. As I said earlier, if you have a food allergy, all you're really doing with that food allergy is you're creating, with a food allergy, these same two things happen. So maybe what I should do is draw an arrow here and show you that mucus and inflammation are also a side effect of food and chemical reactivity. So again, maybe it's these things, maybe it's this thing. In my opinion is you should have your doctor rule all of those things out to ensure that you're approaching this from the right angle, because headache is one of the most common reasons people will visit their doctor. I think it's like of every 7 doctor visits in the world, in the United States at least, one of those 7 visits is for headache pain. So it's 1 out of 7 visits. So it's a pretty prevalent, pretty common thing. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.